Welcome to Frankie the Podcast, the companion podcast to the trans visibility animated film, Frankie the Magicorn. This first batch of podcasts will consist of interviews with a number of trans individuals who want to share their stories and contribute to the project.
This week, it's part 2 of our interview with Geena Phillips, co-founder of Spectrum, the Atlanta Trans Community Choir. What was on your checklist of things to do post-transition before you went in?
Oh, wow. Get better at walking in heels, which of course now is sort of amusing. Well, yeah, I can't walk and I can wear any shoes I care to, honestly, because I don't have to worry about how I walk in them. So that's kind of a double-edged sword, I suppose. The main thing now is that part of my health things is my feet kind of do a lot of swelling and weird back and forth stuff. It's kind of strange. If you look at the shoes I'm wearing now, they're actually like Velcro adjustable all over. Yeah, they're designed specifically for feet that get swollen, which is funny because I do not have diabetes. That's kind of what that sort of thing is made for, because diabetic folks get a lot of swelling and so forth. And from a recent hospital visit I had, I know for sure I don't have diabetes because they stuck every finger on every hand multiple times to test my blood. So that was nice.
How many times? I'm sorry.
I was there for 6 days and they test multiple times a day.
Oh, okay. Multiple times. Wow, every finger of every hand?
Oh, yeah. Well, luckily, that's another weird sort of advantage of my hands, my fingertips being mostly numb.
Oh,
it's not a big deal.
Okay.
So,
yay.
I try to look at the bright side for stuff like this. Because I'll tell you, when I could still sort of walk, I had a hard time getting around. Mm-hmm. It was not easy for me. And now that I'm in a wheelchair, I get around pretty handily. I mean, I went to the movies Wednesday by myself.
Right.
I took Marta over.
Really?
Yeah, it was not a big deal at all. Cool. And I had a great time. Met a friend for lunch, which is always nice.
Endgame was pretty damn sweet.
Pretty damn sweet. But I wanted to be comfortable with myself. That's my main goal of transition, was to sort of not feel like I was sort of like hovering outside my own body. And, that took a while for me to really get comfortable with. And I think part of the way I was presenting for a number of years, I think that may have been a factor in some of it. Because now I'm much more comfortable with how I present with people. And it feels perfectly fine and natural to me. And I'm glad for it. Like I said, it's opened up a whole new areas for me, just in terms of interaction with people. And just kind of the conversation I have with myself about my own identity. I don't feel like I'm at odds with anything in that regard, which I guess was a goal all along, even if I didn't recognize it as that.
How would you describe gender dysphoria to somebody who's never experienced it?
I think one of the examples people use, which I think is a bad one, is imagine you woke up and you were a different gender than you are now. And how would you feel about that? Trying to interact with the world, knowing who you are supposed to be, but having the way your body is be different. And I think people don't relate to that as much. And some people have used the example instead of, well, imagine you're exactly who you are right now, but everybody treats you differently.
Oh.
Everybody treats you as if you're female, and you're not. You're absolutely sure that you're not, but everyone treats you that way, and no matter how much you say otherwise, they will not listen to you.
Oh. I
think that's a part of it. Another idea I heard from someone, which is really great, was comparing it to handedness. Just imagine that you have to write with your non-dominant hand.
Yeah.
And with practice, you can have a facsimile maybe of what your writing's supposed to look like, but it's never authentic. It's never really you, and it never feels natural. It never feels right for you, no matter how much you practice at it. And some people practice at it pretty hard. I mean, up to 1/5 of trans women in the U.S. have military experience, and a lot of them go into the service as a way to maybe this will like chase away all these other things, and make me the man I'm supposed to be. And of course, that pretty much almost never works. So that's probably the best example I would use. I think the handedness is a really good one, because it's something everybody can imagine. You could do it. Anybody listening could do it right now. Just take that non-dominant hand and just try and write with it. And try to imagine everyone saying, oh, this is the hand you're supposed to write with. And you should never write with the other hand ever. This is the hand. Like I said, you can try it. You could maybe even do it well enough to fool other people, but it's never you. And I think that's a really good example.
Thank you for that. What was a movie or show, piece of media that was like, they really don't get it? And I know we're talking about a lot because there's been very few places where it has, but yeah.
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to think of some examples. I watched that old Medical Center from like 1970 with Robert Reed playing someone who was transitioning, and that was an interesting thing that didn't really get much right. But they were making a sincere effort, and they weren't treating it like a gag or anything else. So, and it was, one of the things was inaccurate because basically the Dr. Chad Everett, his old friend, was back and asked him to perform her genital surgery. It's a procedure he's never done before. That's usually a bad idea. You should not do that. But I'm trying to think of some other,
It sounds like something that probably happened often on that show. It's never been done before. Only you can, Miracle Doctor.
Yeah, probably.
But still,
I think in that case, Robert Reed's character felt that going to an old friend would be. I think that was the rationale in that case. I think it's somebody else who didn't handle it well. Law and Order SVU has never handled trans stuff, right?
Really?
They've had it several times.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
and I will tell you, there were episodes in 2009 and 2015. In both cases, they featured teenage trans girls. In both cases, they were played by cis boys. And this is super cynical and makes me mad. The only reason they did that was so they could depict both characters topless. Because you couldn't do that with a trans girl playing the role.
Oh.
And that, to me, is really cynical and awful. Sours me on SVU. They already had, their attitude towards sex work is already pretty bad. In other aspects, they handle okay. I mean, the first one from 2009 is not too bad in that regard, except for that one thing. Although they also had Daniela Say from the L Word, who played a trans man on that show, play a trans man on the same episode. Also, Laverne Cox had a cameo.
Good.
But this is 2009 because nobody knew who she was yet. And I've dropped Law and Order SVU once in a while, and then picked it back up. I think part of it is because it fulfills that long-standing female fantasy of a rape being handled correctly by the police.
That's why people watch it.
Oh, that's exactly why people watch it. Oh yeah. It's totally a sci-fi fantasy show. Well, I mean, so many times when they've consistently had cis people playing trans roles. I remember on Night Court, Dan had a friend who transitioned, and it was played by a drag performer. So that was, although she was a good character, and they treated her with dignity and so forth. But that's still problematic. I remember back on the Jeffersons. George Jefferson had a friend in his old unit, and she transitioned, and she's like totally gorgeous and glamorous. It's really actually kind of interesting. She's played by a cis woman. I'm trying to think, as far as really getting it wrong, I mean, Danish Girl has real problems.
That's what I hear.
Yeah. And of course, that one that came out recently, Girl, which got like an award at Cannes and everything else. It's pretty bad. And of course, they have a cis man playing this young trans woman, and there's like some self-mutilation stuff, and it's pretty awful. And of course, it got awards. Film awarding bodies.
Yeah, so did Green Book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, when I think about Green Book, I think about that. I can't remember what it was called now. Is it called Anywhere? I can't remember. No, but it was basically it featured Matt Bomer as a trans sex worker, and there was a lot of protest about that movie. Mark Ruffalo helped produce it, and stood by it when people were criticizing it, and it was not. That was not so great. And the thing is, they did the thing they always do, because Matt Bomer is gay, and they decided that would make it all right. They did that on Mr. Robot, too. Because they have a trans character on there, too, played by B.D. Wong. And because B.D. Wong is gay, both he and the show's creator give themselves a pass on it. And that's a problem. Because the character is actually super interesting. But, it definitely leaves a bad taste in your mouth. So.
Yeah. There are certain shows that I feel like there's a handful of shows that should be obligated to get it right in a casual way.
Mm-hmm.
Like Law and Order should be doing it
right,
because there's so many old people watching it. Or NCIS, my mom's favorite show that isn't Outlander. We need like Laverne Cox and people to just walk in and be like, just somebody who's on the team's like, yeah, no, I'm the best one there is at genetic ancestry, and I can tell you this doesn't add up. Well, bye. And Mark Harmon or whoever, Harmon will say something like, wow, she's really tall. And she's like, well, yeah, a lot of trans women are. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, got it. And that's it. And that's where it ends. And the show moves on.
Oh.
It's just normalized.
Yeah. Jen Matthews actually played a character kind of like that on Nashville.
Cool.
For a good part of a season. She played like a psychiatrist.
Oh, cool.
I didn't watch the show, but...
And she's a trans actress?
Oh, yes, she's wonderful. She actually... helped write and stars in Her Story, which you can see the Saturday on YouTube. It was like a series of mini episodes that form like one 45-minute program. But I'll tell you a show that always kind of bugs me a little bit, of course, is Transparent.
Yeah.
Because it gets a lot of things right. I will tell you, the episode in the second season, I think it is, when it flashes back to when Mara's a child and they have the bomb shelter like outside the house, in their house. This is when she lives with her mother and her grandfather. And first they got a trans girl to play her, which is brilliant. Because she was still presenting male back then, of course she was a kid. And that episode, I had to actually pause it because it actually like really hit me super hard right there. And that's what bugged me because that show has had so much potential and then tripped over so many things. I guess that was maybe third season. Second season.
So the third season episode's a good one?
Yes.
Okay.
And the second season flashback story arc to before World War II with Mara's Aunt Hedel, or Gettle rather, I think it is, played by Hari Neff, who was a fantastic trans actress. That's really good, and it's really heartbreaking too, because it gives you some idea about Mara's mother, Rose, her backstory.
Who's this again?
Rose.
I mean, what episode is this?
This is like all the second season. There, these flashback sequences. Basically, with the Hirschfeld Institute that was burned by the Nazis in like 1933. That photograph you most see of Nazi book burnings is the burning of the library there.
Oh.
And what happened was virtually all the research we had about trans people before that time was burned in that fire.
Oh, man.
That's why when idiots start talking about, trans people is this modern thing they came up with. No, it wasn't. He was already for the normalization of how trans people, how gay people were treated. He said, medical treatment is the way to help most trans people, and his work was destroyed. He was murdered by the Nazis. So that's why when people start getting onto that stuff, that really gets me worked up because that it's just a complete misunderstanding of history. They don't know what the history of all this is. So. But so that's the things it does right. But of course, even before we knew he was an abuser, having Jeffrey Tambor playing a trans woman was not a great choice. And of course, then we find out that he actually was like sexually harassing trans women working on the show, which is horrifying. That's pretty bad. Also, I have to say, as far as the show dramatically, a lot of times it felt less like entertainment and more like Jill Soloway's therapy, which is a problem. And I think this says something for what Jill thinks about themselves because basically all three of the Pfefferman children are Jill's POV characters. Like all three of them are. And of course, all three of them are pretty much irredeemable shitheels. Mm-hmm. And I think that says a lot about Jill's view of himself and the family. And so that's a show that has so much good stuff to it, but was so disappointing.
On the flip side, what are some shows, books, movies, etc., that really do get it?
I will tell you, Drunk History has an episode with the Stonewall story, and it's freaking brilliant. Trans actresses play everybody that's supposed to play. Yes, actually, a trans actress who originally was in like one episode of Transparent plays Marsha P. Johnson, and Tracy. What is her last name? Oh my God, I love her, and I can't play Sylvia Rivera, though she's less in the foreground in that case, and does the story very well. Yeah, the writer who talks about it does a great job, and it's done very well. Other stuff that gets it right. I think some aspects of how Orange is the New Black handles a trans character are okay, and some are not so hot. But it's it's definitely kind of hit or miss. I will tell you, if you can find it, I don't know if they're ever going to release it streaming, but the CBS series Doubt, which ran for 2 episodes and was pulled from the schedule, and they dumped the rest of the episodes over the course of the summer for the 13 episodes they made. Co-stars Laverne Cox. She's not the main character, but one of the primary characters. And all of her stuff is handled very well. And I recommend people give it a watch. There are parts of it that are kind of, it's, what's her name? 27 Dresses gal. Who's that? Knocked Up. What is her name? I can't, but she's the lead in it. And I can see where that would get on.
Heigl?
Katherine Heigl, that's the one. Elliot Gould's in it, and some other folks who are pretty good.
Did you say Elliot Gould?
Yes.
Nice.
But yeah, it's a halfway decent show. It's got some sort of stereotypical legal drama stuff to it because it's a legal drama. Especially for her character, handled it very well. And what's her name? Imogen Benny, who wrote Nevada, the great trans novel Nevada. She was one of the writers on the show. And Nevada is a credible book that every trans person should read. I was 45 when I read it, and I regret it because it was so transformative. I wish it had been written when I was younger, and I could have read it because it is so great.
That again is Nevada by
Imogen, Imogen. I can't remember how it's pronounced. Binnie, Binnie.
Thank you.
That's a great film. Other media that gets it right. Amazon. At a cartoon series called Danger and Eggs.
Danger and Eggs?
Yes, and the showrunner was Shadi Petosky.
Oh.
For the last half of the season, they had a number of queer characters, including a young trans girl voiced by Jazz Jennings. They also had Rhea Butcher and Cameron Esposito as a queer couple on the show. Oh. And, of course, I Am Jazz pretty much gets it right. I mean, of course...
I Am Jazzed?
I Am Jazz.
I Am Jazz.
Yes, a reality show about Jazz Jennings and her family.
Oh, okay.
The literally only downside of the show is there's also a lot of sort of reality TV show quote unquote tension, and that gets a little much, but done with a pretty good spirit. I think it's done a lot for the trans community and trans youth, having a young voice like that who's sort of been in the public eye for so long. And was able to talk about her truth. And the show always features a lot of other trans folk, which is good, so people can get an idea of, how different people can be. That not everybody is the same thing, which is good. I think it's one of the media that gets it right. Of course, I mentioned Her Story, which is really good. It's about two trans women. I think you can still see that on YouTube. I don't know if they're going to do a second season of that or not.
And now for a brief charity shout-out. Geena would like to endorse SONG. Southerners on New Ground is a regional queer liberation organization made up of Black people, people of color, immigrants, undocumented people, people with disabilities, working class and rural and small town LGBTQ people in the South. SONG believes that we are bound together by a shared desire for ourselves, each other, and our communities to survive and thrive. SONG believes that community organizing is the best way for us to build collective power and transform the South. Out of this belief, they are committed to building freedom movements rooted in Southern traditions, like community organizing, political education, storytelling, music, breaking bread, resistance, humor, performance, critical thinking, and celebration. You can find out all about them and how to get involved at southernersonnewground.org.
And I'll tell you what, as far as queer representation in general, I think She-Ra's on the right track.
Yeah.
And you guys haven't seen season 2, right?
No.
Wait till you watch it. Because
we aren't going to wait. We're doing it when we get home.
Sweet.
Since we just finished the shit.
Yeah, it is such a good show.
Such a good show.
And not just because it makes nerd fanboys angry. That's a side benefit.
That's not hard to do. I mean, hell, you can, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle recent movies did that, and they were, not as good for society as She-Ra was.
Teen Titans Go,
Uh-huh.
they specifically put their critics in the crosshairs all the time.
Oh, we love that show.
They love how they specifically go after the criticisms that people make of them.
What's the name of
and
that remote
face them head
guy?
on. Oh yeah,
the remote
god,
controller or whatever his name is.
yeah. Oh, I love that show.
Yeah.
And the thing is,
Yeah, we do too.
people who dismiss that show do not get it.
No.
Okay, well, so here's the thing with Teen Titans. It is designed for people over 35 and under 15 because everybody else watched Teen Titans and they loved
Right.
it. And they hate seeing these characters they love and develop a relationship with turned into weird caricatures. It's written for anybody who halfway experienced the 80s because there's all the references in it.
Oh, yeah. Also, the DC Comics references come fast and furious. If you watch that movie, it is so dense, it's almost hard to absorb.
Oh, the conversation with Deathstroke. It's like, really, it's more that Deadpool is trying to be like me.
Which is literally true.
It is literally true. It was Rob Liefeld's and the other guy's attempt to create a character like Deathstroke. It's just that Deadpool ended up becoming hilarious and fourth wall breaking, and Deathstroke was just still himself.
Right. That is a great movie.
It is. Thank you.
I was glad I got to see it in the theater.
Likewise. So, yes, the short answer of everything here is go see Teen Titans Go to the Movies, which actually is now just on DVD and streaming. Never mind. Also, trans representation in other media is good. Mostly Teen Titans Go to the Movies. No, I'm going to edit that out. That was stupid as hell. This might be a good question for you specifically, a friend of mine from Rocky Horror of a Bajillion Years. What is your opinion of drag?
I admire drag as an art. I think as an art form, it's actually pretty important. Where it gets into trouble is when cis gay men, especially cis gay white men, will use it to sort of mock the other identities that aren't necessarily theirs, and that can be problematic. I mean, because I'll be honest, I've seen some borderline racist drag in my time, and it's not okay. There's this sort of idea that gay men have this sort of shield of invulnerability when it comes to not doing representation well, or even to downright, racist and sexist stereotypes. That's where I think it crosses a line, and that's why I really can't stand RuPaul. Of course, RuPaul's not white, but very much not respectful of trans people. And that's, like I said, that's always a problem. Like I said, as an art form, I think it's fantastic. There's so much creativity, just so much of people channeling parts of their personalities that maybe they don't get to express otherwise in regular life. And that I'm all for. That's never been an issue. It's just when it gets to this other end where it's, first of all, it's sort of trying to co-opt trans identities, which is a problem in and of itself, where it's parroting women and other minorities in ways that are, not okay. I don't know how we have the conversation that fixes that, because it's not as though cis gay men don't face their own problems in society. That's not the issue either. But once again, it's about, even if you're a marginalized group, learning to own your own privilege and learning to not fall into those sort of comfortable traps where you benefit from your privilege and don't find a way to use that to try and help other identities that are more marginalized than you.
2 interviews ago, someone suggested I start asking this question. Everybody does or what advice would you give your 13, 14-year-old self? But here's one. If your 13, 14-year-old self could see you now, how would they react?
Oh, I think they'd be like, what's with the wheelchair?
Yeah, I just realized I'm in the middle of saying it. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's a good question. I think the realization that, maybe who and what I am isn't bad or wrong would be helpful. And if people could see how I interact with the world, if I could see that at a young age, I think that would be very helpful too. To understand that I can interact with the world as myself and be accepted and loved. When you're a young teenager and you feel that isolation, I grew up in the country. I had it even worse than a lot of folks do. That's at the time. As far as that feeling of intense isolation, just being able to see that there's a place past that, I think would have been very useful for me.
Do you have a story about your experience the first time presenting?
And I remember one time, and I was living at my sister's house. This was after I came back to Virginia from New Jersey. This is before I started college in 1987. When no one was at my sister's house, I got dressed, and I had a sweater, all the falsies. I put on some ridiculous press-on nails. Did that before I got dressed, which was a terrible idea. And dressed in a skirt and tights, and boots with a slight heel. And first I went to the basement of the Hotel Roanoke. They used to have the Roanoke Comedy Club. Because at the time I was doing shows there occasionally. And I was from one of the waitresses, and I wanted to say hi to her and talk to her a little bit. She wasn't there at the time. So I left, went to a mall. And I walked around the mall, and I had very obviously gotten clocked. And there were some folks making some really disparaging remarks. And I kind of felt unsafe, so I ended up going back to my car. And I ended up driving all the way back to the county where I lived, because the mall in area of Roanoke was in the next county from where I was. I changed in the car, and I visited with a friend's mom on the way back, just because I was, it had not gone well, and I just wanted to talk to somebody. So that was that not a great first experience, and I'm glad it happened. But that's the time too. I still believe I was a crossdresser too. So I was still in the tail end of that sort of experience in my life. But that whole summer got pretty dark for me. I had a group of folks that I was friends with, being in drama, that definitely helped. So that sort of was what helped me do well in that first 2 years of college, even though I was still very much questioning what was going on with me.
Some fun pop culture questions. All right. Imagine the story of your transition told in a montage. You got it? Yeah. What song is playing over that montage?
Oh, God. You know what? There's an instrumental by They Might Be Giants called Spacesuit.
Cool.
I think that would be a good one. It has sort of that feeling of sort of free flight, sort of not being unfettered and kind of out, in the void a little bit, but not in a lonely way, but in just kind of a joyous way. Mm-hmm. I think that might be a good one for that.
Cool. All right. So let's say this thing blows up on Tumblr, and everybody's like itching to hear more about it, and people want to be a part of it. Who, if you had the choice, would be the narrator?
I think it'd be good. There's a trans man actor named Scott Turner Schofield. He's really good. He's from this area. He kind of lives in New York and stuff now, but I've actually seen him do narration stuff for Atlanta Freedom Bands.
Bold and the Beautiful Stars.
Oh yes, He's done a few things. And I've personally seen him.
For trans people, it's different than for gay and lesbian people. If you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, if you don't come out of the closet, that's a very hard reality to live with, to not be your full self.
Yeah, that's a good voice. Oh man, he would be good for Frankie too if I needed. But I have somebody in mind. 3 stages of Frankie, actually, all trans men.
That's good.
Like there's one who I'm thinking for, since one trans fellow I know is not going to go through any hormone therapy because he loves his voice and spent so many years training it. He's still going to stick with it. So he can do a child voice of a trans man.
It's funny because the reason the choir happened in the first place, a friend of mine was visiting, who I've been friends with in high school, so it's someone I knew for a very long time. Friend, turns out they're trans too. It's funny because we tried dating a couple times, and that back before anything. And so that was a sort of hilarious misadventure. And they were in town for like a work thing, and my wife and I were dropping them off at the house of the friend they were staying with while they were in town. The conversation turned to the trans choir in Boston. It was like one of the first. There was one in San Francisco before that, but honestly, we didn't know much about it. It was actually hard to learn about them later on. They were never as public as some of the other ones. Anyway, so my friend was about to start HRT and was concerned about what it would do to their voice, their singing voice. And that's what we talked about. We talked about the choir, and that was in the car after we dropped them off. That was when Laurie and I sort of came up with almost the entire concept behind Spectrum, was because the trans choir as a vehicle for helping trans folk be accustomed to their voices. And if their voices changed, help them with that. If their voices hadn't changed, help them understand and find what's good and valuable in what they have. And I think that's one area where I think the choir did very well. And some folks, definitely struggled. Some folks had issues with how their voice sounded and never got really comfortable with it. That's not an uncommon thing that would happen. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because that, especially for trans men whose vocal cords do change quite a bit if they take testosterone, that's definitely a thing to think about.
I put this out there as much as I can and ask people to pass it on. For people before and after transitioning, if you're a singer, please record a duet with yourself, Natalie and Nat Cole style.
I was one person to be dead for that to happen.
I can't think of a better analogy. Come on.
I had to get you on that.
I know. Final question for now. Does it get better?
It absolutely can get better. It can get better. First of all, you got to be around for it. That's an absolute requirement for anything getting better. It won't get better if you're not here to experience it. That is so important for everyone to know, that you have value, that your life means something. Even if you don't know now, one of the things we can't predict is which lives will touch and in what way. There's no way to predict that. And if you're not around, then there are people who are never going to have the benefit of knowing you. And I can't tell you the life I've led, just how important that's been to me. Because if you can even touch one life and help them see the value in themselves, I mean, that's everything. That's how we prosper in a society, is to be there for each other. And every person who's not there means that's one less thing for everyone else to be able to lean on and to help them. And I think that's kind of our whole purpose of life here on the planet.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for joining us, Geena.
I'm glad I could do it.
Yeah.
This first batch of interviews were conducted by our producer and animation director, Sketch McQuinner. Intro music by Chicago-based musician Ronan Cohn.
Nostalgia music by Raphael Crooks from freepd.com.
I'm Ronan Cohn. Spread the word and be your authentic self. Thanks so much.